Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Nitecore Store's Flashlight Lore. Today I will teach you how to read in the dark. Have you ever encountered yourself in this situation? You turn the lights off in a room, perhaps in preparation to go to sleep, and the once seemingly well-illuminated room is now enveloped in darkness. As you stumble across towards your bed, relying on muscle memory alone, you bump into your chair or step on a Lego brick and let forth a string of curses with such a vigor and gusto that would make a sailor blush. And as you shuffle into bed, shifting around to find that sweet spot that will invite the most pleasant of respite, you cannot help but notice the outlines begin to form, the largest ones at first, like a crude ink drawing, first of your desk and chair, only silhouettes for now, perhaps the frame of the doorway to your closet. The blades of the ceiling fan begin to materialize, or better yet, solidify as sharpness and clarity increases, but only to a certain extent. Yet, you can't seem to make out the popcorn texture on the ceiling. You know it's there, you have seen it a million times over, I'm sure. You haven't memorized the entire landscape, like some fastidious ceiling topologist, but you know that there should be cracks and divots, ridges and ravines. But other than the largest of accents, the rest is all a blur. Now why is that? This phenomenon is called scotopic vision, or the vision of the eye under low light levels, and we suck at it. By we, I mean people. Scotopic vision is accompanied by chromatic distortion, lowered visual acuity, as well as retarded perception speed. First, let us examine the conditions under which natural scotopic vision occurs. Scotopic vision in humans occur between luminance levels of 10 to the -3 and 10 to the -6 candelas per square meter. Mesopic vision occurs in intermediary lighting conditions of luminance between 10 to the -3 to 10 to the 0.5 candelas per square meter, and is essentially a combination of both scotopic and photopic vision. Photopic vision is the vision we experience during normal lighting conditions, anything above 10 candelas per square meter. Now, I am sure at some point you learned that humans have two types of visual cells, differentiated as rods and cones. I vaguely recall being taught this concept, albeit a gross oversimplification, in the anatomy portion of 9th grade biology. I believe I registered the information as cones are responsible for racism, I mean colors, and rods are responsible for everything else, contrast, depth, motion, peripheral vision, and etc. Now that I have had the opportunity to further delve into this information myself, it turns out that for the most part I was kind of right. Yes, cone cells are indeed responsible for differentiating colors, a topic I might broach in a later episode in relation to high CRI lights. But as it turns out, rod cells are sensitive to color. Specifically, rod cells are most sensitive to wavelengths around 498 nanometers to 507 nanometers, which is referred to as the average person as bluish green, and if they're feeling particularly frisky, a greenish blue, or turquoise orgasm cyan extravaganza by metrosexuals. Furthermore, rod cells are insensitive to wavelengths longer than 640 nanometers and are often saying rude things about the mothers of other nanometers. This particular set of conditions is known as the Purkinje effect. Take, for example, this image of a bouquet of flowers. Imagine what you would see should you turn off the light. I will give you a couple of seconds to imagine this. Now here is a relative render of what you would perceive with scotopic vision. Notice how much darker the red flower near the bottom translates to during scotopic vision, and how the blue and green hues retain a much higher contrast. This is the Purkinje effect in action. The Purkinje effect, often referred to as Purkinje shift, is the tendency for the peak luminance sensitivity of the eye to shift towards the blue end of the visible light spectrum at lower illumination levels as part of scotopic vision adaptation. As a natural consequence, the red side of the visible light spectrum will appear darker relative to other colors as light levels decrease. This effect is named after Czech anatomist Jan Evangelista Purkinje.
Jan Evangelista Purkinje.
Wow! In addition to this color sensitivity shift, the other sacrifices to vision that occur in low light environments are the lowered visual acuity and perception degradation. It is like I said in the beginning of the video, when you are lying down in your bed at night and you look up to the ceiling, once your eyes have adjusted, even if you know that the texture is there, yet you are seemingly unable to make out the finer details. This is due to a process that happens in the eye not dissimilar to changing activating the ISO function on a camera. Your pupils dilate in an effort to allow what little light is available into the eye to stimulate the photoreceptor cells in the retina. However, there is a distinct difference in how rod cells and cone cells operate. Rod cells are far more sensitive than cone cells. It has been noted that a single rod cell is sensitive enough to respond to a single photon of light and is about 100 times more sensitive to photons than cone cells, whereas cone cells require tens of hundreds of photons to become activated. This is also the reason why it is rather jarring when you suddenly turn on the light in a dark room when your eyes were adjusted to scotopic vision, because rods are much more sensitive to light, and up until moments ago your pupils were fully dilated to allow in the little light that was able to reach your rod cells. Think of it this way: a rod cell is like a young child that is just starting to get into bird watching, with his old grandfather who is an ornithologist, who is the cone cell in this analogy. If a bird were to zip on by, that child might exclaim, "That was a bird, I saw it, it was a bird," whereas the older grandfather might have missed it. However, if a bird were sitting still on a branch in clear view, the child would still be limited to exclaiming, "That was a bird, it's definitely a bird," whereas the older ornithologist would be able to use this opportunity to gather more stimuli and produce higher fidelity, and tell his grandson that indeed that is an Andean cock of the rock sitting next to a fluffy-backed tit babbler. Furthermore, scotopic visual acuity is often attributed to the differing arrangements of photoreceptor cells to the optic nerve. Multiple rod cells converge on a single interneuron in the optic nerve that then travels to your brain, whereas cone cells each have their own direct connection to the optic nerve. So think of your brain as the detective trying to solve a case. Your rod cells are like the emotional witnesses. They might say, "That man was gigantic, I was scared for my life.
He was so huge, I thought he was going to crush us all.
He was big, I tell you. 10 feet tall, that tells you."
I've never seen no some bitch that thing there that big there, what?
Individually, the information is fairly useless from these emotional witnesses, but collectively, you might jot down that the culprit might have been a rather large individual. On the other hand, a cone cell would be like the CCTV footage, fewer than the witnesses, but of much higher fidelity. Thus, the trade-off between rod cells and cone cells are pure perception in exchange for fidelity, improved contrast, and color differentiation. The rods need less stimuli but offer lower fidelity, whereas the cone cells require more stimuli but offer higher fidelity. So, how do we combine all of this information to help you read in the dark? Red lights. Like you can find on our NU32 headlamp or HC65 series headlamps, or an MT10C EDC flashlight, perhaps the P18 tactical flashlight, or Nitecore's MH27 multicolor flashlight. Remember the Purkinje effect and how rod cells are insensitive to light with a wavelength above 640 nanometers. These are red lights. Red lights are the perfect solution for getting us the best of both worlds. All of the benefits of low light scotopic vision with all the clarity and resolution of photopic vision by stimulating your cone cells that respond to red light, which has no effect on your rod cells. This is why submarines, cockpits on airplanes when flying at night, underground workers such as miners, excavators, diggers, drillers, and people who work outside at night rely on red light to maintain their visual acuity at night. The main benefit isn't just visual acuity. No, this can be accompanied at night or in a dark setting with a white light. However, since white light contains all the wavelengths in the visible spectrum, these wavelengths stimulate your rod cells to think it is brighter than it actually is, and also restricts your pupils to adjust. Thus, when you turn off the white light source, there is this lag period or adjustment time to return to scotopic vision. So, to read in the dark, just turn on a red light, which technically means it is no longer dark. I mean, it is a light. So I guess in the end, I'm just a big dumb fart that likes to cheat and win on technicality. That concludes the brief overview on the reason why people use red lights for low light vision. If you have enjoyed this video, or perhaps learned something new, or still think I am a big dumb fart, please leave a comment or suggestion below. As a show of appreciation for our YouTube subscribers, save 10% on your entire order at Nitecore Store when you use the code U10 at checkout. If you would like to stay up to date on all future product releases, sales announcements, flashlight related news and content, please consider subscribing to the Nitecore Store YouTube channel. And thank you.